You think you know cannabis? Think again. This isn't just some plant you roll up and smoke. It's a mirror, and most of you can't handle what you see in it. Everyone's got an opinion, right? It's medicine, it's poison, it's spiritual, it's just fun. But what if I told you none of that matters? What if the real question isn't what cannabis is, but what it reveals about who you are? Here's what nobody wants to admit: this plant doesn't lie. It takes whatever is hiding inside you and throws it right in your face: your fears, your dreams, your deepest truths. Can you handle that? Ancient shamans knew this secret. They didn't use cannabis to escape reality. They used it to dive deeper into it, to strip away every mask, every excuse, every comfortable lie they told themselves. But look around today. We've turned something sacred into a commodity, something profound into a party trick. We're failing the test, and we don't even realize there was one. Look what we've done. We took something holy and turned it into a happy meal. You can literally buy weed at a drive-through now. Think about that. Something that once required months of preparation, fasting, prayer. Now you get it faster than a burger. Is this progress, or are we missing something huge? The plant hasn't changed, but we have. And that's the problem. See, without ceremony, cannabis becomes chaos. Without ritual, it's just recreation. And recreation without purpose? That's just running away from yourself with extra steps. Here's what's really messing with people's heads. They think cannabis is supposed to make them feel good. Wrong. It's supposed to make you feel everything: the good, the bad, the ugly truths you've been hiding from. Can you handle that level of honesty? Most people can't. So they smoke while scrolling TikTok, numbing themselves with distractions on top of distractions. They're using a spiritual amplifier to enhance their spiritual emptiness. How's that working out? The ancients knew better. They understood that this plant doesn't give you what you want. It shows you what you need. Big difference. But capitalism doesn't sell truth. It sells comfort. It sells the lie that you can have transformation without confrontation. So now we have cannabis dispensaries that look like Apple stores: clean, white, sterile. Everything packaged in pretty colors with names like Chill Vibes and Happy Dreams. Where's the warning label that says this might show you parts of yourself you'd rather not see? You want to know why so many people are having bad experiences with weed now? Because they're bringing their scattered, distracted, overstimulated minds to something that demands presence. They're showing up to a temple in flip-flops, wondering why they don't feel divine. The plant isn't broken. Your approach is: you're using a sacred key to open the door to more entertainment. That's like using a Ferrari to deliver pizza. Stop treating cannabis like it owes you a good time. Start asking what it's trying to teach you. Because trust me, the lesson's there, whether you're ready for it or not. You think you discovered weed. You're about 5,000 years too late. Before your great-great-great-grandparents even existed, people were already unlocking doors in their minds with this plant. But they weren't doing it for fun. They were doing it to find God. Here's what blows my mind. In ancient India, they literally gave cannabis to their destroyer god, Shiva, the guy whose job it was to burn down everything fake. His followers didn't smoke to chill out. They smoked to obliterate themselves completely. And they called it sacred. What are you calling it? These weren't weekend warriors getting stoned in their mom's basement. These were people who fasted for weeks, prayed for months, just to earn the right to take one hit. One hit that could change their entire existence. Meanwhile, You're upset when the dispensary runs out of your favorite gummy flavor. The Chinese had a different approach. They mixed cannabis with secret herbs like they were cooking up magic. But not the Harry Potter kind. The kind that rips open reality and shows you what's actually there. They knew something we forgot. This plant doesn't just alter your mood, it alters your soul. Are you prepared for that kind of surgery? Then you had the Sufi poets, those mystical lovers spinning in circles, drunk on divine presence. Even they were terrified of hashish. Why? Because they understood the difference between touching God and just feeling good. One transforms you forever. The other leaves you exactly where you started, just more confused. Which one are you getting? Look at Rastafarians today. They still do it right. Before they light up, they light candles. They pray. They treat the plant like it's alive, conscious, listening, because it is, and it remembers how it's supposed to be used. Every ancient culture that touched this plant knew the secret. Your intention creates your reality. Come with respect, get wisdom. Come with greed, get burned. So here's my question for you. When you reach for that joint, what are you really reaching for? Because the plant knows the difference, even if you don't. And it's been keeping score since the beginning of time. Most people today are playing a game they don't understand with rules they never learned, and wondering why they keep losing. Here's what nobody tells you about that mirror cannabis holds up. It doesn't lie, ever. Your deepest fears, it sees them. That pain you buried 10 years ago, still there. Those questions you're too scared to ask yourself, the plant's already asking them for you. And you think you can just light up after a bad day and expect good vibes? That's like expecting a hurricane to care about your picnic plans. The ancients understood something we've completely forgotten. Before they took even one hit, they prepared. We're talking weeks of fasting, hours of meditation, complete silence. Not because they were being dramatic, but because they knew what you're about to learn the hard way. Your mind needs to be clean before it gets expanded. Why? Because cannabis isn't a feel-good drug. It's a truth-telling machine. And truth doesn't always feel nice. Think about the last time you got anxious while high. What did you blame? Bad weed, wrong strain, too much THC, wrong again. The plant was doing exactly what it's supposed to do, showing you what's really going on inside that head of yours. Carl Jung had a name for it: the shadow. All those parts of yourself you've been running from, ignoring, pretending, don't exist. Cannabis doesn't create your problems. It just turns up the volume on what was already playing. And for most people, what's playing is a symphony of unprocessed trauma. Here's the part that's going to mess with your head: that paranoia you feel when you're high, that sense of being watched. That's not the weed making you crazy. That's your soul trying to get your attention. It's saying, hey, remember me? The part of you that you've been ignoring? But instead of listening, what do? You turn on Netflix. You scroll through your phone. You do anything to avoid the conversation your spirit is trying to have with you. And that's where it gets dangerous. Because cannabis doesn't just open doors in your mind, it opens doors in your energy field too. Ancient mystics knew this. They understood that when you alter your consciousness without proper preparation, you become vulnerable, not just to your own buried emotions, but to things you're not even aware of. Dion Fortune, one of the greatest occult minds of the 20th century, wrote about this. She said altered states make your spiritual boundaries porous. like taking down the walls of your house and wondering why strangers keep walking in. Are you starting to see why preparation mattered so much? Modern culture has turned you into spiritual sitting ducks. You consume cannabis like it's candy, with no understanding of what you're actually doing to your energy system. No wonder so many people report feeling drained, unfocused, or lost after regular use. You're essentially plugging a delicate instrument into a broken amplifier and wondering why it sounds like noise instead of music. Cannabis interacts with your energy body like fire in a dry forest. In the right conditions, it brings light, warmth, transformation. In the wrong conditions, it just burns everything down. Without grounding, without clear intentions, without proper boundaries, what's meant to elevate you starts to fragment you instead. You lose focus. You lose drive. You start living in a fog that feels peaceful, but is actually just spiritual stagnation. And here's the twisted part: you begin to call that fog healing. You start thinking that feeling numb is the same as feeling better. But healing isn't about turning down the volume on life. Healing is about turning up your ability to handle it. Real healing brings clarity, power, presence, not the suspension of all three. So let me ask you something that might hurt. Is your system even clean enough for clarity? Have you done the inner work necessary to handle what cannabis is trying to show you? Because the plant doesn't clean your house, it just turns on all the lights. And if your house is a mess, that's exactly what you're going to see. Once upon a time, cannabis was only used when the soul was ready for the journey. Now it's used because it's Friday night and you're bored. Do you see the problem? This shift didn't happen overnight. It was slow, calculated, disguised as progress. What used to be sacred became commercial. What used to require intention became impulse. We went from spiritual warriors to weekend consumers. You think cannabis just affects your brain? Think again. This plant reaches deeper than your thoughts, deeper than your feelings. It touches the invisible part of you that most people don't even know exists. Your energy field, your spiritual body, the part of you that carries every memory, every trauma, every unhealed wound you've been dragging around for years. And here's what's terrifying: the plant doesn't ask permission before it starts messing with that field. It just amplifies whatever mess is already there. So when someone smokes and suddenly feels like they can read minds, feel colors, or touch the universe, that's not magic. That's amplification. Their energy was already clean, already tuned, already ready for expansion. But what happens when your inner world is chaos? When you're carrying years of unprocessed anger, buried grief, unexpressed fears? The plant amplifies that too. And suddenly, you're not having a spiritual experience, you're having a breakdown. Think of your energy body like a guitar. When it's perfectly tuned, cannabis can play it like a master musician, creating beautiful resonance, perfect harmony, even sacred silence. But when that guitar is broken, dusty, completely out of tune, all you get is noise. Loud, chaotic, overwhelming noise. And here's where it gets dangerous. People mistake that noise for wisdom. They think feeling more means seeing more. They confuse stimulation with enlightenment. But you're not becoming more aware. You're just becoming louder inside. Ever wonder why ancient traditions were obsessed with spiritual hygiene? Why they fasted, meditated, chanted, exposed themselves to cold, spent hours in silence before using any sacred plant? Because they understood something we've forgotten. You have to clean the instrument before you can play it properly. These weren't superstitions, these were survival techniques. They knew that opening doors in your consciousness without proper preparation is like inviting strangers into a house you haven't cleaned in years. What are they going to find when they get there? Reiki masters know this. They'll tell you cannabis makes you incredibly sensitive to energy, both good and bad. You become like a spiritual sponge, absorbing everything around you. But if you're not grounded, if you don't know how to protect yourself, that sensitivity becomes a curse instead of a gift. The same thing happens with Kundalini energy. Cannabis can wake up that sleeping serpent at the base of your spine before your body is ready to handle that much power. You feel electric, euphoric, like you're touching God, until you crash, until you spiral, until you realize you've opened a door you don't know how to close. And that's when the plant becomes fog instead of fire, numbness instead of clarity, a spiritual band aid instead of actual healing. Look around at these so called spiritual festivals. Everyone's burning sage wearing crystals, talking about chakras while they pass joints around like party favors. They've turned the sacred into a fashion statement. But cannabis doesn't care about your Instagram aesthetic. This plant is ancient, wild, and brutally honest. It's not here to make you look spiritual. It's here to make you real. Picture this. You're sitting in a sacred circle thousands of years ago. The fire crackles. Everyone's silent. And when the cannabis finally gets passed around, nobody's trying to escape the world. They're trying to remember who they really are within it. What happened to that version of getting high? Amazonian shamans will tell you something that'll blow your mind. Every plant has consciousness. Every plant is alive, aware, watching. And when you invite that consciousness into your body, it doesn't just sit there quietly. It starts talking to you, not with words, but with feelings, memories, energy that hits you like lightning. But here's the catch. If your inner world is a mess, that conversation gets scrambled. It's like trying to have a deep philosophical discussion while someone's blasting death metal in the background. The plant's message gets distorted by all your unhealed stuff. And that's why so many people feel like garbage after smoking. Drained, confused, emotionally wrecked. They blame the weed, but the real problem is they showed up to a spiritual conversation completely unprepared for what they might hear. No clearing, no reverence, no respect. Just pass that joint and let's see what happens. The ceremony used to create the container. Nothing sacred was ever taken casually. There was no such thing as weekend warriors back then, only communion with the divine. But we didn't want that, did we? Ritual is inconvenient. It requires time, discipline, humility. All those things our instant gratification culture has trained us to avoid. So, what happened when we stripped away the ritual? The energy had nowhere to go. It spilled into our distractions, our anxieties, our unhealed wounds. Without direction, cannabis just amplifies whatever state you're already in. That's why some people feel inspired and creative, while others feel paranoid and stuck. Same plant, completely different vessels. Think about that the next time you light up alone in your room, scrolling through TikTok. You've taken something that was once used to commune with God and turned it into background music for your boredom. And then you wonder why the experience feels shallow. Here's the lie everyone's bought into, that good intentions are enough, that if you mean well, the plant will somehow guide you to enlightenment. But cannabis doesn't care about your feelings. It responds to your energy, your readiness, the actual clarity of your inner world, not your wishful thinking. Too many people approach it like spiritual tourists. They light up hoping to feel better, think deeper, escape their problems. But they forget the most important thing. The plant doesn't give you peace. It reveals whether peace was already there. Without a proper container, that kind of power becomes dangerous. And without community, your insights turn into delusions faster than you can say, I'm enlightened. The plant might crack you open, but it's other people who help hold you together. Look at how Rastafarians still do it right. When they smoke, it's not some casual Friday night activity. It's part of reasoning sessions, sacred gatherings where the herb gets passed with the same reverence you'd show a holy book. There's scripture, discussion, chanting, the conscious pursuit of divine truth. It's not about getting high, it's about getting aligned. Words carry weight in those circles. Silence is respected. Everyone becomes both student and teacher. The herb moves clockwise like energy, like time, like the sacred wheel of life itself. In that space, cannabis isn't the star of the show. It's the bridge that connects everyone to something higher. The same principle shows up in indigenous traditions around the world. Whether it's ayahuasca in the Amazon or peyote in the desert, substances that alter consciousness are only taken when the group, the ritual, and the intention are perfectly aligned. The experience belongs to the container, not the individual. There's always a song, a prayer, a fire, elders watching, unseen spirits guarding the edges. You don't journey alone. Even when your eyes are closed and you're deep in the vision, the circle holds you. It's not just about what the plant shows you, it's about having people there to help you make sense of it when you come back. Now, contrast that with your typical modern cannabis experience: a joint in one hand, phone in the other, no grounding, no preparation, no exit strategy, just stimulus and solitude. What's supposed to be sacred becomes another episode of dissociation. And that's where everything starts falling apart. Because when you get cracked open and there's nobody there to help you process what you've seen, the insights don't integrate, they fragment. You start thinking you've tapped into some cosmic truth, but there's no witness, no mirror, no reality check. It becomes this private religion of half remembered thoughts and disconnected realizations. You mistake loneliness for enlightenment, but when you're in a real circle, something completely different happens. You're actually heard, you're seen, you're reminded that whatever insight you had isn't just about you, it's part of something bigger. You become responsible for what the plant gave you. Because here's what most people don't understand: the plant doesn't just give, it tasks you. It asks, okay, you've seen the truth. Now, what are you going to do about it? Will you live differently? Will you serve others? Will you actually heal, or just collect more spiritual experiences like Pokemon cards? In sacred circles, your ego has nowhere to hide. You can't pretend you're awakened when someone else in the circle sees right through your act. You can't claim transformation without being held accountable. There's no place to perform inside the ceremony. And that's exactly why it works. Because it's not about how cannabis makes you feel, it's about how that experience gets witnessed, challenged, integrated into your actual life. The circle prevents your illusions from becoming your doctrine. When you're alone, everything feels profound because there's no resistance, no feedback, no reality check. But not every thought that emerges when you're high is sacred wisdom. Some of it is just mental noise, wearing spiritual clothing. The circle helps you sort the real insights from the garbage. Even in our modern world, you can create these sacred containers. It doesn't require a jungle or an ancient temple, just a few trusted friends, candles lit, phones turned off, a clear intention spoken out loud, shared silence before and after, a commitment to actually reflect on the experience instead of just consuming it. Here's the trap that catches almost everyone. You light up, feel this incredible rush of insight, and think you've just unlocked the secrets of the universe. But let me ask you something that might sting. What have you actually done with all those profound realizations? Because feeling enlightened isn't the same as being enlightened. You know that moment when you're high and everything suddenly makes sense? Music sounds deeper, colors look richer, synchronicities pop up everywhere like the universe is personally texting you. Your journal fills with insights that feel earth shattering. You're convinced you've cracked the code of existence. But then what happens? Monday morning rolls around, and you're right back to your old patterns. Same arguments with your partner, same avoidance of your problems, same inability to sit with discomfort without reaching for something to numb it. So, where did all that wisdom go? Here's what nobody wants to admit: cannabis is a master of illusion. It doesn't just show you things, it makes you feel like those things are more important than they actually are. It mimics transcendence so perfectly that you start believing the imitation is the real thing. You think you've evolved just because you felt something intense, but depth isn't measured by how profound your thoughts seemed while you were stoned. It's measured by how you live when you're sober. Most regular smokers I know have had the same breakthrough about 10,000 times. They keep rediscovering their trauma, feeling one with the universe, experiencing the present moment like it's some revolutionary concept. But their lives never actually change. Why? Because they're addicted to the feeling of progress without doing the work that creates real progress. Ancient mystics had a name for this: spiritual inflation. It's when your ego gets drunk on the experience of awakening and starts wearing enlightenment like a costume. You begin speaking in spiritual buzzwords, quoting philosophers, acting like you've transcended human problems. But have you? Really? Look at your relationships. Are they deeper? Look at your conflicts. Do you handle them with more wisdom? Look at your suffering. Have you actually learned to move through it differently? Or do you just have prettier words to describe the same old mess? Osho once said something that'll probably make you uncomfortable. Substances open doors that only silence should open. He wasn't anti-cannabis. He was warning about the instability of forced insights. A door kicked open doesn't stay open, and the visions it offers can actually distort your reality if your mind isn't ready to hold them properly. The high becomes this pedestal you stand on, looking down at all the unenlightened people who haven't seen what you've seen. But what if you haven't actually seen anything clearly? What if you've just felt everything intensely? There's a massive difference. Cannabis can absolutely offer perspective. I'm not denying that. But unless that perspective becomes practice, unless it actually shifts how you show up in your life, it's just spiritual entertainment. Expensive, time consuming, ego feeding entertainment. Cannabis offers access, not arrival. But the world doesn't need more people with access to profound experiences. It needs more people who embody what they've learned, who don't just visit the sacred, they live it. So here's my challenge to you. Stop collecting spiritual experiences like trophies. Start asking what each one demands from you. Because the real question isn't whether cannabis can show you truth. It's whether you're brave enough to live that truth when you're sober. Discernment and integration. Listen carefully, because what I'm about to tell you might shatter everything you think you know about getting high. You light up when you're stressed. You reach for that joint when anxiety creeps in. You tell yourself it's medicine, that it's healing, that it's opening your mind. But here's the brutal truth nobody talks about. You're not using cannabis. It's using you. Think about it. When was the last time you sat with your pain without trying to escape it? When did you last face your restlessness without immediately reaching for something to numb it? I'll wait. See, here's what they don't tell you in all those spiritual cannabis circles. The plant isn't magic. You are. But you've been so busy chasing the high that you've forgotten the power was inside you all along. Cannabis can be your teacher, yes, but only if you're ready to be a student. And students don't run to their teacher every time life gets uncomfortable. They learn to sit with the lesson first. Before you even think about lighting up, ask yourself this: what am I really seeking here? Are you looking for truth? Or are you just trying to feel better? Because there's a world of difference between using cannabis to explore your consciousness and using it to silence what your consciousness is desperately trying to tell you. One path leads to wisdom, the other, just another way to stay stuck in your own story. Your ancestors knew this. They didn't just smoke and zone out on their phones. They fasted, they prayed, they sat in silence, they prepared themselves like warriors preparing for battle. Because that's what spiritual work is. A battle against the parts of yourself that keep you small. But you skip all that. You want the revelation without the preparation. You want the insight without the integration. You want to feel deep without learning to live deep. And that's exactly why you keep coming back for more. Here's something that's going to sting. Every time you reach for cannabis as your first response to discomfort, you're telling yourself that you're not strong enough to handle your own life. You're teaching yourself that peace can only come from outside, that clarity requires a chemical key. But what happens when the high wears off? What happens when you're back in your regular consciousness, dealing with the same problems, the same anxiety, the same restless mind? You light up again, don't you? The real question isn't whether cannabis can open doors. Of course it can. The question is, what are you doing with what's behind those doors? Are you walking through with courage and intention? Or are you just peeking in, getting overwhelmed, and running back to familiar ground? Because here's what I've learned from watching thousands of people chase plant medicine like it's their salvation. Most people stop at the feeling. They get lost in the poetry of the experience. They mistake the emotion for the truth. They think because they felt something profound, they've become profound. But feeling something doesn't make it real. And seeing something in an altered state doesn't make it wisdom. You know what makes it wisdom? What you do the next morning. How you treat the person who cuts you off in traffic. Whether you can stay present during a boring conversation. That's the test. Not what you experience during the high, but who you become when you're sober. Listen, I'm not here to tell you never to use cannabis. I'm here to tell you to stop letting it use you, to stop making it your first response to every uncomfortable emotion, to stop building your spiritual identity around a plant. The deepest spiritual traditions understood something we've forgotten: discernment, the ability to cut through your own delusions, the wisdom to ask uncomfortable questions about your motivations. In ancient Greece, they called it the inner blade that cuts through deception. Are you willing to sharpen yours? Are you brave enough to ask whether this experience is showing you truth or just telling you what you want to hear? Because cannabis will give you both. It speaks in riddles and emotions and beautiful metaphors. And if you're not grounded in reality, you'll build entire belief systems out of thoughts that were never meant to be taken literally. I've seen it happen. People who think they're becoming enlightened, but are really just getting better at decorating their own confusion. People who mistake the echo for the essence, the reflection for the real thing. The plant amplifies what's already there. If you come to it carrying confusion, that confusion will bloom into 1,000 beautiful, meaningless insights. If you come carrying clarity, that clarity will deepen into something you can actually use. So, what are you carrying? Here's the hardest question of all. Are you willing to set the plant down when it no longer serves your growth? Can you recognize when you're using it as a crutch instead of a compass? Can you tell the difference between spiritual exploration and spiritual entertainment? Most people can't. They get addicted not to the chemical, but to the identity. They start believing they can't access their own depth without external help. They forget that the wisdom was never in the leaf. It was in how the leaf helped them remember their own power. The real journey begins when you can access that expanded state without anything external. When you can find peace in the middle of chaos. When you can stay awake without chemical assistance. That's not just sobriety, that's sovereignty. Think about it. That moment of pure clarity, that was you. The deep connection you felt, that was you. The peace that washed over everything, still you. The plant was just a mirror, showing you pieces of yourself you'd forgotten existed. But mirrors don't create beauty, they only reflect it. And you've been staring at the reflection so long, you forgot to look at yourself. Every high was a glimpse of your potential. Every moment of insight was your own wisdom breaking through. You thought you needed the key, but you were always the door. So what happens when you stop reaching for the smoke and start reaching for yourself? What happens when you realize the fire was never in the plant? It was always burning inside you.